Hi everyone, if you're new here, I'm Aude, a writer and filmmaker. I have published novels and short stories over the years in French and English. Today, I'm going to show you how to write a novel for beginners on Scrivener. So, as you know, I started writing when I was a child, and it was before Scrivener was even a thing. Microsoft Word was such a helpful tool for me back then, but it does have its limitations. And then there was Google Docs, which also has its own limitation, and there's that whole controversy on AI. But when Scrivener appeared, I was skeptical at first, but my best friend bought me a license for my birthday, and I've used it for 12 years now. I've actually written my last two novels on Scrivener and almost every single one of my scripts since I have bought it. So this is how I do it. So I usually either handwrite or write down a brief outline on Google Docs or Microsoft Word or on my notebook before writing a novel. But once I'm ready, I just open the app. I click on getting started, and there's different templates. Usually the novel template is okay, but I also have created my own template, especially when I was writing plays. So you just create it, put whichever name you want. And from there on, you have the title section where you can change the title, add your name, add your agent's name. And then you have the option to see basically the chapters and also your different pages there, and you can rename them. One thing I love with Scrivener is that you have the option to add your characters' descriptions. So that's really helpful for me because I always have my character's description on hand, and you can write them there and have them handy in case you forget what your characters are like, or you make them do things that don't necessarily make sense. So I also have my own templates for the characters, which is usually like age, physical appearance, and everything else that I've described on my website. So you have the option to see all your projects, in the outlines, and you also have the option to go back to the front page, and you can have different front page based on the different format that you're using. And also on the side, you can see the synopsis, and you can also write down all the information when it comes to your project. If you go on view and click on corkboard, you can have an option to really see the different section and outline. If you click on sample output, you can see the different output for your novel, depending on if you want a traditional paperback or an ebook or even something for Kindle. So there we have the notes section. That's really good for any kind of random notes you have about your projects that you need there. Usually I would just copy and paste whichever notes I've written in my notebook beforehand, or I would just have a look at my notebook if I can't be bothered to just write them down, but super helpful. On the right hand side, you have a synopsis section. So you can write down a synopsis for your entire novel, but also a synopsis for each one of your chapters. Because I tend to divide my novels by chapters, I really like to create a short synopsis for each chapter, but you don't have to. There's also a places section. So if you click on new and text, you can just add the different places that will feature in your novel, and you can also add all the research you've done, and you can even add pictures into that document to have a visual of what it looks like, especially if you have very detailed descriptions. I create folders for each chapters, but usually I don't have those of chapters. And then for each chapters, I create one page usually for each. You don't have to do that. You can just create one page for each chapter without creating folder, but I like that it's very neat. So they really conceived the software so that it contains anything that you might need if you are writing a book. There's even a dedication section if you need one on your project. And if you ever lose a document, or you have a document that you can't find, that's very easy. Just go on the trash section and you move back whichever document you might have accidentally put there back to where it belongs. So once again, that's very helpful, because sometimes, there's issues, project don't sync, and you lose some of your work. Although I usually know how many chapters my book will contain, sometimes I change my mind. So what I do is that in order to create new chapters, I just duplicate whichever chapter I was creating before, and then I just add a new text and I start writing. I do the same for my scripts, especially when I'm working on a new version, but I'll tell you more about that later. A very interesting feature is that you can also convert your text. You can convert your text to script, and you can change the format as well. You can also, for example, convert your text into all lower cases or all upper cases, which sometimes helps actually. So the revision mode is very helpful if you want to work on the same document. So if you just click on revision mode in the format section, you will be able to select the color you want to use to revise. As you can see, I am on draft 2, so I'm choosing red to make my changes. And that way you can see what has changed. I usually don't always use revision mode, simply because I'd rather just create a V1 folder for the first draft, and then I duplicate that folder and I title it V2, but it's really up to you. One of my most used feature is the toggle split that you can see at the top on the right hand side. That's the little window icon. So I click on it because sometimes I'm working on a document, but there's some things that were very helpful in a chapter and I want to copy and paste this, or when I'm doing loads of revisions, I just want to know what I've written before, what can be used, what can be changed. So that's really helpful to have these two documents with you at the same time. If like me, you like targets and goals, going to project and is very helpful, because then you can set up your session targets. You can set up a date, a number of words you want to hit by that set date. You can even look at your stats. So as you can see there, you can even set up a target. For example, you want to write 25 pages and add your menu only on 2 pages, and you can update it or even change your targets depending on how you're feeling. The project history is very helpful to track your growth as well, and to have a look at how much you've written on a set number of dates. And you can also use the go-to section to go to different parts of your document. And one thing that's very important is that when you click on toggle split, be mindful of working on the right document you want to work on, and not the other one that you don't want to touch, because sometimes you can be confused. So be mindful of that. View is also very helpful because you can also use it to see the corkscrew modes, like you can see, and then basically have an outline of the different chapters. You can also click on the arrow actually to go back to the page you were working on before. So that's a great way to see the outline and see the kind of notes you have for your chapters in a very visual way. The difference between the corkboard view and the outline view is in the outline view you can have different labels, different data. You can see if that's the first draft or not. You can also have data in terms of how many words there is in your document, where the corkboard is mainly for the outline and the index cards of your documents. Another thing I love with Scrivener are the different writing tools that they're offering. So you have the option to look into the dictionary, to also use Wikipedia. I usually just, go on Chrome and do it, but you can also do that from the software. You also have the option to have a linguistic focus to see how much words you are using when, there's a written speech, or how little words you're using. Another feature I love is the generate names. That is so helpful. They can generate names based on gender, based on background, which is great if you're not really good with names. When your novel is ready, you can compile it, and you have multiple options to compile a novel. You can compile it in the PDF format. You can also compile it in the Kindle ebook format. You can compile it as a paperback. You can even select which chapters you want to add, or which text documents you want to add into the compiling. You can also change the format. It can be your average manuscript format, or, the paperback format as mentioned, or any other. And that is the preview if you want to compile your document as a PDF. If you want to, for example, compile your document in another option, so you can go basically at the top. And once you go at the top, you have the different options, and you just select the one that fits your project the best. And once you've selected that, what you're going to do is click on basically compile, and that's you're done. Good luck with writing your novel. If you're using Scrivener to write your novel, let me know in the comments. Feel free to like and subscribe to my channel for more writing and filmmaking related videos. If you want to support my small business and my work, look at my website as well as my books available on most stores. Thanks for today. Goodbye.